Let's bring in Antony Loewenstein in Sydney. He's an independent journalist who wrote The Palestine Laboratory, which is a book on Israel's arms and surveillance technology. Thank you for your time. While much of the focus has been on the situation in Gaza, things seem to be getting more unstable in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. As we've been reporting, more than 100 Palestinians have been killed in raids by the army or in settler attacks. What is your feeling of what is going on there?
This has really been a quasi-hidden war for a long time, long before October 7, and it's worsened since then. And the reason for that is that there's been a massive escalation this year of settler attacks and Israeli soldier attacks against Palestinians. Routinely, soldiers and settlers work together. There's this myth that the Israeli military sort of keeps Israelis and settlers and Palestinians separate, but in fact they don't. They work with settlers to attack Palestinians and often kick them out of their homes. And I've been hearing even before October 7, a number of Palestinian towns and villages have been forced to leave because of regular and violent attacks from settlers and soldiers. That's worsened in the last 3 weeks. And in some ways, the warnings around this have been here for years. I started reporting on this sort of activity in the West Bank in 2005. And even then, there were massive settler and soldier attacks. It's obviously worsened in the last 20 or so years. And in some ways, what's so alarming about this is that this is the moment that many settlers are taking because they think that much of the world is distracted by what's happening in Gaza, and the Israeli government is obviously very distracted. But of course, they're also giving carte blanche for these settlers to do wild things in the West Bank and actually causing pogroms. So it's really, really disturbing.
Indeed. I mean, the settlers are now armed in many cases. We're hearing stories of settlers who, for the first time, are getting weapons because they think they're protecting themselves. Where do you see this going?
Well, it's worth also saying that the Israeli government in the last 3 weeks has been giving weapons to settlers. I mean, Itamar Ben-Gvir, one of the senior ministers in Netanyahu's government, there's footage online people can find of him actually giving guns to settlers, which, of course, is only going to inflame the situation. Look, the Palestinian Authority here is not just useless, but in fact complicit, that they've made a decision years ago that it was much better to work with the Israeli occupation forces to supposedly keep Hamas and any resistance to the occupation down, rather than actually fighting any kind of settler or soldier terrorism. I worry that it's going to be a massive explosion. There are certainly Palestinian groups that have every reason to be unbelievably angry and frustrated with increasing violence, particularly Jenin and Nablus, but also elsewhere. And I'm getting reports from Israeli and Palestinian human rights organisations in Palestine, but also contacts there telling me that in the last week particularly, every single day, settlers and soldiers often are coming to Palestinian villages and telling them, literally, if you do not leave within 24 hours, we will kill you, literally kill you. And we've seen, as you say, huge numbers of Palestinians dying. So the possibility of a second major front is shocking, but also not surprising when there's been 3 million Palestinians under occupation for over half a century.
So just to be clear, you think realistically there could be another front opening up against the Israelis in the occupied West Bank?
Well, I'm not saying there's necessarily going to be. I'm saying that it's certainly conceivable that another intifada, huge numbers of Palestinians resisting what they see as the growing collusion between settlers and soldiers rising up. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but I'm saying it's conceivable. And in fact, so much of the international media coverage has been focused on Gaza, rightly so, because of the horrific incidents that are happening there in the Israeli bombardment. But what's happening in the West Bank has been a slow burn for years, which is now exploding, particularly this year. Huge numbers of Palestinians have been killed in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, and especially since October the 7th. So I really worry, as my Israeli and Palestinian friends and colleagues are saying, that this is a flashpoint that has been left to burn for years by the international community.
Antony Loewenstein, good to get your thoughts. An independent journalist speaking there from Sydney.
Thank you.